Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I want to talk about the following subject: why it is necessary and why we must create a new form of governing ourselves and new systems of administration, completely, practically from scratch. Something that would not be trying anything that we have in the past in a different way, but completely reconceptualize the way we govern our countries and administrate our societies. And I'm going to explain it based on Gaia's humanism principles, or Gaia humanist principles, which I have talked about a lot in the past. So I'm going to try to take a different angle this time. We have this idea, this preconceived notion in the world, in the whole world, in all societies, that bad things, suffering, evil people, the ugly parts of civilization, they just kind of happen to us, and they come irremediably from somewhere that we can't do much about. This is just a way that we go on believing, and it has its sources also through ways that we have explained it. In scripture, we have sort of God's predicament bestowed onto his creation of born sinners, or people who just sin against God, and therefore because God is, of course, an abstract, untangible, unmanifestable, we don't actually know if God exists. We go on faith, but in any case, that means that if scripture or belief in God, the God of scripture says that we will fail, or we do things that are wrong and that are not pleasing to him, it means that for some unexplained reason we are prone or provoked by some evil part of ourselves that also doesn't have an explanation, or the devil perhaps, to just go against ourselves, go against others. So that kind of helps this this subconscious belief that evil will just happen, or suffering will just happen. The truth of the world is that there's two kinds of suffering: the natural suffering that we really can't do anything about, which is illnesses, the Earth biosphere, the planet we're on, and the weather, the cold, the hunger, if there happens to not be food, gravity, animals that may be stronger than us if we're out in the outback without any weapons, and there would be tigers in the outback. And then there is the suffering that we create, which is the worst, actually. It's the worst to a part of our psyche, which is, we're most tormented by the other sufferings. We can understand that a body gets ill and dies, or that we walked into the wrong place in a forest and an animal attacked us, or that we left ourselves out in the cold and we are freezing and die of or end up suffering hypothermia. Our brain suffers, we suffer, but there is a sort of agreement that we understand unless we did something about it, there was nothing that nature, or nothing that could have been done had I not precisely taken care of that possibility. The suffering that comes from humanity is the worst one, because it goes against something that never reconciles deep within us. We're actually we're not supposed to hurt one another, and I'm not saying this in a religious way. I'm saying this in the logic of sensible of evolution's sensibility. Sensibility has the intention of creating collective forms of life. It creates a collective. It doesn't create an individual and then the collective. It creates a collective life form, whether it be plants or animals, and it wants evolution and creation, natural creation, cosmic creation, wants to see that life form thrive and proliferate. And so its first will is to push life forward. Light hits the ingredients of the planet, the substance of a planet, and chemical reactions and what have you, and life starts evolving and developing. And the force behind that, you could equate it to the power of the star's light, because its heat is what creates the combustions and chemistry and biology later on that will create forms of life. And so it is not questioning its own will to push forward all forms of life. Evolution is not. The power of our sun and the stars of the universe are not questioning if it should continue making that life form. Now it just pushes life forms forward. So the truth to the essential central truth to every life form is one of being, thriving, eating, maturing, growing and living until life expires. We run out of life material and we end up dying. So in other words, we can't blame creation or evolution for example, war. Though there is aggression in among animals, and even among animals, plants in botany, we could interpret that plants invade each other and choke each other out or what have you. If you compare the sophistication and the development, the vastly spread and developed disproportionate capacity to injure and destroy and kill one another and other forms of life at the hands of human beings, it is vastly more, it seems to be telling something else is going on, because animals might fight, and we've seen chimpanzees create sides. But eventually, the will for species to thrive and life to go on, and possibly these tribes of chimps will distance themselves, is stronger. Because it is not thinking how to interpret life. Life simply is and thrives and pushes forward and evolves. Mankind, humankind, is different in that it is the distance between its logical, analytical mind, intelligence, and the natural, present, or primal mind or intelligence is vastly greater, much more distant than it is in animals. And to get an idea of how different, why we're practically another life form, imagine a squirrel or a crow or a chimpanzee using a tool to, fetch something that it wants to eat, and then it just drops it once it gets what it wants, and it continues being the beautiful animal that it is. We will reach other worlds and discover the chemistry of the universe, and then change everything else that we have discovered and built based on new discoveries, and transform over and over with an intelligence. But not only that, it is an intelligence that is able to look at itself, which animals can't. Animals can't ponder, at least that we can tell, and say, I wonder if this is the right planet for us. We will question our own being and our own existence on the planet. And but that's not what I want to talk about. It's important that we understand just how vastly greater this differentiation is. And now I want to talk about what that differentiation does to us. It is important that humanity understands what is happening to it. This is the first thing. If we were all to wake up tomorrow and witness our history of wars and killing one another, and just the aggression, the hostility in our cities, and how we punish each other, and how we attack each other, and how we pollute our food and our environment, the first logical question that would come to our mind is, what is wrong with us? What is happening with us? Why are we doing this? To us, it doesn't seem to make sense. And of course, this is a very natural question, because evolution would ask itself the same thing if it could. It would ask itself, what are you doing? I spent millions of years evolving this life form to thrive, and I'm not done. I'm still going forward, and to infinity, perhaps, continuing to push the evolution of life. Who knows, with an evolving process that may go on to other worlds, for all we know. I'm not, it's not, I didn't do this. Who's doing this? That's what evolution would ask. Who's devising chemical weapons to kill, to wipe out itself? I didn't do that. It is us. And so animals don't do this. We have this immense ability to so proliferously develop self-destruction. Animals do attack each other, but like I'm saying, the distance, the amount that we are far, just like the difference between a tool that a crow uses and the super collider in Switzerland, that vast distance is also expressed in other ways that we are different, like the amount and the sophistication with which we destroy each other. Now, I'm going to explain how to answer this question, this first primal question that the human mind makes it. You can imagine ourselves coming out of caves and starting to use language and write for the first time millions of years ago or whenever. And imagine ourselves, imagine the human mind inspired and pushed forward, without it knowing, of course, by evolution's will to continue pushing forward evolution in life forms, and asking itself, upon seeing an act of self-destruction, like, for example, inventing an axe, for example, and then all of a sudden somebody grabs that axe and goes outside and chops down the only fruit tree that we had in the garden. Okay, and everybody goes, "What are you doing? We all ate from that tree." And that person, well, I wanted to see how it worked, or whatever the explanation was. But this is metaphorical to what this immense differentiation, distance between the present primal, or call it natural intelligence or conscious mind reasoning, and the ability that we have to create complicated logic and analysis and invention. Therefore, invention, creation of sciences. One mind is, I'm going to leave that example on the back burner for a second. Our conscious, our unconscious intelligence, which is the side that is in tune or harmonious or directly coming forth, our primitive present awareness of life, and is the mind that understands we eat food, and when we're hungry, we just go look for food, or the people who matter the most since we're kids, since we're babies. It is the reasoning of the world that is truest, unquestionable, none invented. It is not an explanation. It certainly isn't an ideology. It is just simply understanding what is. And this is a lot of things. A lot of things we think about throughout the day that are simply the way it is. Our life is. Our predicament is. The body's function. Things are wanted or feared, and so forth. And from there, the distance that is the mind that is resourcefully capable of analyzing logic, inventing, and explaining things as we believe we can explain nature, why it does the things it does, is not directly connected. How can I say this? It all comes from one point, but it has its own mind. It has a very unstable relationship to the primitive essence of our thinking intelligence. It has a purpose to be put at the service of survival, but not necessarily by naturally harmonizing with creation and natural forms. It just has the ability to think concentratedly and analyze and invent and observe with reasoning and applying a logic that will produce answers, right? So since it's like an unstable tower. It's like something that will continue growing and eventually falls because it's not grounded on the ever-present is of the natural half, let's call it, of the mind. Yet the two are part of our single brain, our single thinking in a way. We don't think two times, we think once. But in that once, there is the part of our brain that has the capacity of logic and analysis, which is out of touch with why things are created the way they are. It has a capacity to reason and analyze, but it goes off like a renegade venturer, and therefore, in its ignorance, you could say, of how things really and why things really are what they are, it ends up and then attempting to resolve the life for us. It always tends to find instability and unsatisfy us or hurt us or harm us, because it's not thinking. For example, if it invents something, it is not always caring. If it invents, let's say, for example, a gas engine, it is not constantly thinking, remember that our air has to be clean. Our knowing mind, or the primitive mind, kind of knows that it prefers clean air. It never questions that. It first goes to see if the air is clean to breathe, right? Well, that sounds kind of logical, but I mean, as soon as you taste something that's not right, you won't breathe that, and intuitively will pull back. We know to breathe clean air, period. But the mind that it creates inventions and then later has to deal with how our logical analysis brings back to share, to be part of our existence. It's the results of its complicated, sophisticated, rebel, audacious, precocious, I've called it in other videos, intelligence, are to be reckoned with. We have come up with sciences or schools of thought that have realized we kind of always stray when we don't do things according by, being true to nature or observing nature. We know that things will be uncomfortable, but we'll try anyways, because there's that part of us that can't help itself wanting to sort of arrogantly move aside creator, call it evolution, call it whatever you want, and say, I will tell you what this is. I will tell you how society needs to be structured. I will tell you why this happened. And as we learn sciences, more accurately, and we verify, and we see the ways that are truly natural to the design, we will realize we're wrong. We will correct and improve our sciences, but we never really understand that we're in a constant predicament of failure, of constant disharmony, of constantly being out of step, of constant instability, because of the joint existence of these two intelligences, one which is like very capable and the other one which is always present in the natural essence of consciousness. And so the first thing that we should ask ourselves, we should tell ourselves or ask ourselves is what is happening to us. Now, we have asked this to ourselves. In fact, harming ourselves produces a question. Killing our children in wars, polluting our water, seeing our inventions go and harm the things that we did not mean to harm, immediately provokes a question, because, like I said before, the purpose of evolution and the forthgoing of life is one that does not include the possibility of self-affliction. It may create with it, as it goes strongly, immensely forward, little self-afflictions that appear that way to us, but in reality, they're not. They're ways of dealing with air, or adjusting, or dealing with changing conditions. It's not exactly, as far as evolution and the furthering of life forms, there is no possibility, there's no consideration that ever it would harm itself. So because that is our center, because it is the pushing force in our brains, our souls, our hearts, our very being, the core of every life form is that only going forward. When we witness ourselves, which is also that, but not by its intention, do something that harms us, in other words, the central forthgoing force of evolution, it says we logically must ask ourselves, no, that's impossible. That cannot happen. We cannot accept others, or my own family members, or the earth through a flood or whatever, killing my children, or killing our crops, or causing any kind of harm to life's forthgoing. It cannot happen. And so that necessitates the first existential question, 1 billion times larger in us than any other animal. Because maybe an animal too will see that its little stick that it used to take out the honey caused the bees to attack the bear, right? And it's like, whoa, that wasn't supposed to happen. But it kind of ends there, and the bear will learn to, how to disturb the hive next time, from that experience in a way that it doesn't happen again, and that's the end of it. We, on the other hand, look at our civilization. We don't want to destroy our cities. We don't want to kill our children, but we are convinced that war must be because of much uh, how much more immensely unstable that part of the logical analytical mind is. And not that we did not notice that it's not supposed to harm life. We did. And when that question arose, we explained it. We explained it with, with some kind of answer that would satisfy us. Like, God made us this way. God created the world, and we were challenged to, obey God so that we don't do these bad things to ourselves, and therefore behave and do this and honor God. And, a bunch of different religions have their way of dealing with this. And so, but God doesn't really exist in a sense. Creators definitely exist, but the God that we put in Scripture as such, in order to answer this question, is our own creation. Everything, all of civilization, everything is done by us. And as far as religious scriptures goes, it was done by us to answer this this paradigm, this critical occurrence of our existence, where so we harm so much, that we are so capable of harming life and others and doing things that sit wrong with us. It sits wrong with that part of us that is closer to the forthgoing goodwill of wanting to live and thrive and continue evolving. And so we ourselves hold the discomfort. We ourselves are the source of the harm, and we ourselves are the source of the question which needed to be answered. So when this question occurred, we answered it a certain way, but we never answered it simply, this is something that happens to us. Let's see what is happening to us. Therefore, therefore created the how can I say this? The geometry or the formula that explained why we trip, because this capacity to be so intelligent with logical and analytical intelligence is more than we're able to handle with our base mind. In other words, the primary essential harmonious with nature part of thinking, of intelligence, is ultimately the first and the last. It's like the always. It's the one that we have to respond to ultimately. We could go off, we could venture around, travel about the place, but it's always the will of evolution and the thriving of the life form, which will give us acceptance, yay or nay, on the things that we do, even though there's a lot of latitude, and we will even train ourselves to accept harming ourselves in just hideously vast ways for centuries. And still, the truth of the one truth that is the purpose of our thriving is always going to be truest and always the last word, sort of say. So since that is the case, we can, and that is, you could imagine it as the primitive man, the simply is man, the one that knows how his body, how his family exists, and how his immediate society subsists in this planet that it sees around us, and it doesn't attempt anything else. It just lives by its physiology. Will always be the unmovable marker, reference. And so when we ask ourselves, when that question arises and we ask ourselves, why are we doing this to ourselves? Or why is, how is love getting hurt by something that we didn't start off meaning badly? We thought it was the right thing to do, and now we have this question, this was not supposed to happen, which is a question that will always occur because the center is unmovable. And so as long as we may go forward and let's say, for example, do agriculture, and we have plants that pretty much take care of themselves, and fruits and vegetables and trees, and we made that a whole lot easier because we just go out into the farm and pick the plants. Well, it doesn't look like there will be any conflict there. And so the question won't arise. But soon enough, we will create something, a tractor, or, or use too much water that will, kill our civilization, as they say happened to the Incas. And now the question arises, because what wasn't supposed to happen, which is for water to run out, or for in an unnatural, unpredictable way, happened. And boom, that's the question. That question is an existential condition of our brain, of our mind, of our intelligence, of our body, of our species. This is what we are. We are this constant, perpetual instability. So if the question had been answered as such, why do we do this? What's wrong with us? Oh, it's our constant, perpetual instability. We never would have designated an abstract, something that is out of our control, something we can't do anything about, sort of evil that so often people will just be born mean, and mean will come from somewhere, and God will punish, and what have you, would never have happened. We would have, for the first time, embraced ourselves in absolute freedom of will and freedom of existence, because we would have owned that we're born with this arm that's too long for us. It can do great things. It can reach way up high, but every once in a while it will hit somebody around or get in the way, or and that's us. Knowing that is us is the first step towards bringing not utopia or paradise, but what we're capable of. A world where mankind or humankind doesn't afflict suffering upon itself anymore, because we will be aware of it happening all the time, possibly happening. We wouldn't be just trying to go forward with what we make, and then, oh well, when that intelligence ends up harming the environment, ourselves, killing each other, killing others, we just have an explanation. Well, it was God, it's this thing that we're stuck with, evil people, what have you. No, we will know that somehow we thought things wrongly. We invented something that we could not control. In fact, our logical and analytical intelligence will always produce things that are unstable, because as a mind, and so this is now getting to government, why we need to reinvent governance. Because as a mind, so the invention of ordering millions of people, governing millions of people, is an ambition of this part of the logical, analytical, precocious, super capable mind. But being tied to the other part, which is our immediate physiology, or what we can understand is kind of happening around us, and what the world is all about, and what our bodies will want or not want, it can't really do justice to evolution, which always wants to protect its whole creation. In other words, if governance was perfect for what we intended to be, to apply something that will distribute and all the stuff that we're capable of making and producing and benefiting ourselves with to everyone, supposedly, right? That's the intention, to the whole population of the country. Like evolution, if evolution had that thought, I was trying to say, there wouldn't be any homeless people or hungry people or people who get the best medical care and other people don't. And It wouldn't be the stuff that we have justified. Oh, well, that's just, you got to take some loss. You got to push forward. This is the best we can do. And for example, when people try to justify and defend their systems of government, they will say, all the great things that have happened, and they will not want to consider that ultimately the first promise of governance, any kind of governance, kings, feudal, monarchy, communism, socialism, democracy, capitalism, whatever you want to call it, is to address all its people and inferring inequality. Except that we're kind of training ourselves to expect what we have accepted must be accepted, which is we can't. There will be failure that comes from somewhere, from other people or from God or from just, it's just the way it is. And because we never embraced, we never owned our own instability predicament. We haven't, as a species, as the predicament of the human mind and in this body, we have never owned it, and we have never started from the point of instability and then started reasoning, well, know that as soon as I start trying to invent something or explain through some ideology, society, or create some chemical or invent some kind of what have you, engineering, know that it won't be long before we start being untrue to what we want, which is what the natural world wants. We all want everyone to survive and thrive, actually. In that core, in that evolutionary first primary force, forthgoing force, we cannot conceive of other ones in our species not going along with us with everything that we're doing as a species. But we're not just that natural mind or evolutionary forthgoing mind. We are a fusion of, another part of it is also, part of us is also that capacity to spearhead with this rebellious, logical, super capable, logical, analytical intelligence. And so we trust it immensely because we can see what it's capable of doing. We have come to realize, in a sense, it's almost like a kid having to do math in grammar school, and all of a sudden they put a calculator. He's 8 years old and has learned to do it on paper, the tables and what have you, and the teacher keeps giving him harder and harder problems. And all of a sudden, the kid finds itself with a super calculator that can do all these calculations, square root and what have you, in seconds, right? It sees that it solves his predicament in class, very easily. Now he doesn't have to rack his brain anymore, and he can just use his calculator. And so so in a sense, our logical intelligence or analytical, this part of our brain, the one that's so disproportionately larger than compared to any other animal, is our spearhead, evolutionary spearhead. Evolution uses it, and look at it this way: evolution uses it to push forward the rest of the animal, of the species, of the brain. But it is in our hands, in the animal's hands, to kind of simplify things. In the primitive, essential, nature harmonized, always present intelligence, it's in its hands, in the primitive man's hands, and it has to use that calculator that can do incredible things. So the kinds of the nature and of how it uses that intelligence is limited by the primitive shortcomings of insecurity, fear that, oh my God, a lightning bolt is going to hit me, or an animal is going to eat me, or I better hurry up, or a disease is going to chew me. So this evolutionary factor of insecurity, suspicion, and fear that we evolved through millions of years with conditions the desperation or the often occurring betrayals in which we will use that intelligence. But at the same time, it is that same animal, that same primitive side of our always present mind and intelligence that is telling it, wait, you're going somewhere that is not where we belong. That chemical is going to poison our food, that weapon is going to kill our children, that ideology is wreaking havoc. You're going away from the natural design. And at the same time, it errs because of the limitations of this same very small-minded, beautifully stable and harmonious intelligence, which has to deal with this amazing, precocious other part of the brain, and therefore is recruited to have to exist alongside this precocious superintelligence in a state of constant instability. And that's what we are. That's what we are. We can't change that. It is actually wonderful because once you understand what we have been given by creators, God, or evolution, or science, or the cosmos, not science, the cosmos, you realize, had it not been for this immense capacity to think such complicated, analytical, logical thoughts, we wouldn't be able to do anything about diseases, hunger, the weather, like animals have to deal with. We can. So it is unbelievably wonderful and all the reason in the world to be thankful for this capacity that human beings have, though we have to first embrace that the price is a perpetual, forever state of which that's not so bad actually once you start thinking about what would come afterwards. Forever state of instability. So once we embrace that, it also means that we then say, and after we embrace that and know that the starting point is our perpetual state of instability and tendency to deharmonize with the natural body, the natural forms of evolution and the earth and the environment and what have you, and we start thinking again in terms of survival, what can we do with this intelligence? We don't have to suffer disease anymore because we can discover biology and find cures. It means that we would start on a new form of reasoning for everything that we do. Because the starting point is the collective. In other words, evolution and life, as far as we know in this world, moves all its individuals, all its, persons. Dolphins are persons, and animals and trees are units. Whatever you want to call it, it is the collective that goes forward. It is not the individual that idea that the individual must push forward and be a leader and then figure it out for everybody else that is going to try to accommodate with his supreme vanguard intelligence is a result of that of the analytical logical mind, which because survival occurs in each one of us. Although the intention of survival or evolution and proliferation is putting the collective first, the intelligence which is pushing forward, remember I said we serve ourselves of logical and analytical intelligence, is manifested in each individual. And logically, we can't think such advanced ideas collectively. We could all look at each other and have a primitive, primitive man kind of thought. We could all look at each other and realize that right about now we're all hungry, or we're all feeling cold, and we may even start sharing sweaters without anyone needing to lead that initiative. But as soon as we start getting a little complicated, the analytical logical mind starts pushing individuals along. And of course, it can never let go of the collective because these two never let go of each other. So one person can't go out there. I'm going to invent. People have done that. Paulo Soleri, he has his idea of a community out in the desert, and but what did he? Who even his that such an eccentric person did it for others. We can't separate those. But as far as the Gaia Humanist school of thought, that would start thinking politically and socially administrative in terms of socially administrative and and other sociological capacities, we would have to be starting from scratch, and because we would put first the notion of vanguarding with the whole collective of humanity. And we don't really have anything like that. We have things that, speak of mankind, and humankind is like this and like that, and people will do this or people will do that. But as soon as we start getting more complicated and start proposing things, we don't realize that as soon as we start engineering ways of administrating a society, creating a government, we start leaving amounts of people perhaps first without realizing, and then at some point we justify. Well, you can't have water reach everybody, so that we can justify continue to go forward. And of course, in a Gaia humanist thought that would think as evolution would think for itself, that would not be a possibility. As soon as our invention, our governing invention, administrative invention, would realize, as soon as we realize, well, how actually would we get that to every single person, or how would every single person be able to comfortably acquire or have that? Would always have to be the case. I don't know where I was going to conclude that sentence, but I think you get my point. So yeah, that's the reason. That would be the starting principle of a Gaia humanist political philosophy, or social, administrative, civil, and civil ideologies too, because a lot of civil ideologies today are just obviously spearheading by the will and the confidence or the belief of a small group of people being right about something that society needs to become like, and ignores all the other people that are saying, no, I'm uncomfortable with that. I don't want that. I'm the opposite. I would, not abort babies. I'm not sure that I want to see my son grow up gay, or, let me express that we're not allowing for everybody to be right, which is what the Gaia humanist evolutionary thought would be. If there is a protest, if there is a discomfort, it means that somewhere, somebody who thought an ideology or a way of distributing governance or what have you didn't care about a growing number of people, that it left them behind. It didn't care to hear them. It didn't care to see what they say. And then at some point, it decided that after answering why they're wrong and what have you, it has to enforce that. And so we have never known a world that is constructed through a Gaia humanist understanding of our of the species, of the paradox that we live in as a collective species on this world. We have never understood really our condition, because that question was answered quickly through some kind of story that would just give us an answer, because that's the thing that we most wanted. It's also a pressure that we answer questions quicker than what we're able to understand the correct answer. So we just rushed it, and we were so uncomfortable with this unbalance and self-harming predicament that we noticed. And so when that first question arose, when we came out of the caves I'm talking about, like I was saying before, it would have been simple perhaps to realize, well, this is just something that we do, and it means that we have to be aware of it and continue doing everything, realizing that there's a big distance between what we're capable of reasoning with logic and inventing with engineerings and sciences, and what ultimately gets harmed, which is another part of the same brain. And therefore own up to it. Perhaps we could have, but we didn't. We explained it a simpler way, that the pressure was on perhaps to satisfy people who are protesting and wanting to kill the inventors of the first catapult or whatever, the first invention that harmed ourselves. And so they said, well, a story. God sent the devil here and there, and now we're born in sin, and in order to escape sin, the devil is mentioned. And there are other ways in which, without going into religion, psychology, I'm not really educated in this, but I'm afraid to go into this, but I would venture to say that other modern explanations for why we are the way we are and why we run into suffering and problems always end up, and this I would know, that's why I'm venturing to say, somehow stem from something that can't be explained, and we have not proven that nature says every once in a while, well, I'm going to send somebody that is bent on destroying other people, killers, and we look for it. We want to find the killer gene, right? Because we want to answer that question. We continue to want to answer that question. And we want to say that genetically some people are predisposed to be antisocial or da 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 da. We are ruled by this necessity to answer this self-harm question, and we don't realize that really the true order of reasoning is that evolution sends forth a collective, and it doesn't really mean anybody to go against society or to look for its own gender for sex, or to go destroy the babies of other, things that are not about thriving forward in the design of the life form. It was not an objective of evolution. Though these things occur, they can all be explained, and they occur sometimes for reasons. Antisocial, but they're usually they're circumstantial. They have to do also a great deal with the world that we've created, and we've taught when we say teach our children, it's like saying we teach ourselves, because we're an ongoing expression, life form expression. So when people say, we don't normally hold this in conscious awareness when we're arguing, making discussions, but to say we treat our elders, we treat our children, or we treat each other, it's always you and me. It's always the species. It's going to be me when I'm older, and I'm like this because of what the world was to me when I was a child, and it's the same for all of us. So the things that we want so desperately to answer because they don't sit right with us, we have to understand that they all stem from this constant instability or lack of harmony between the logical, analytical, precocious, and what else did I say? Rebellious part of our mind, and the one that says, I know I'm just true. This is what it is, part of our brain mind. Um, and everything that we now are so bent on enforcing is most of it is wrong by by this under, by this understanding. And saying that it is wrong, it doesn't mean that we have to run and like the wacky racers run in the other direction and find, it must be the other thing. No, it's the truth, our central truth, and the ideas and intellectuality and the political philosophies that Gaia Humanism would produce have never been developed. They run through the middle, through the center of all of us, and that world is still to be created. It hasn't been created now, or reasoned, or logically deduced yet. However, ecological sciences, green thinking, self-sustainability, and so forth, are our attempt, because we're not rebels against ourselves. There is a part of us that keeps always checking and seeing, and the question keeps arising. We're eating bad. This is not good for us. We are finding out that diseases come from some of the foods that we eat. And so, or Gaia theory, the first environmentalists, the first ecological scientists, they all bounced off something that they realized this cannot continue being that way. So we always notice that we're straying from something that is simply how we are, our natural form. And so all natural ecological sciences come from we have already attempted, we are already trying to, but we still haven't. And you can see this because our own green ecological school of thought of organic and stuff, wants to take parts of our physiology, of our social and collective physiology, and turn it into certain civil formulas or civil prescriptions, ignoring the form of created by evolution and the species. So this continues to happen. We continue to falter even after creating ecological sciences and ecological thinking, because we still haven't owned up to that place where the question arises and we say, it is us. It's just, that's what happens to us all the time, and continuum. We will always be on, as soon as I start thinking complicated thoughts, I will start inventing stuff that goes away from what ultimately is most comfortable for me and truest, and causing me to sooner or later complain or get adapted to problems because I can't stop thinking that I'm always right as a species, because who wouldn't be completely how do you say this? Flash blinded by the light, or completely in awe of this capacity we have to send rockets into space and go into microscopes and build incredible buildings, and who wouldn't be? So that force has always sort of said, just keep pushing that, because even though it seems that it is us who ended up messing up against ourselves, this capacity is so enormous that the answer cannot not be there. And all along, we continue ignoring the instability question that we must own and not delegate to some abstract anymore, but realize that we're alone. We're a whole population that is one being on this planet, and we're basically alone. If creators made us, they left us alone to, maybe they're watching us and hoping that we finally get it. Or, for some people, God is kind of like that. And you don't have to. You can be, obviously, in order to understand this, you have to realize that believing in God, creator, is not part of the situation that will answer our questions. Though we can incorporate especially when you start thinking we should be thankful that somehow we're the only ones that can do this. And this planet seems like somebody did this. And it could be sort of a religious realization, a new religion perhaps, a spiritual realization that it's intentional, that there are creators, that there is a God, that it's not the one that everybody's been trying to describe, but it's a God, gods, more than likely. It's not one individual sitting on a planet, but it's another species. God, creator. But the wonderful part is that it's not necessary for us to get our act together. We can take either route, and it wouldn't be, in other words, it wouldn't make a difference in the development of an earthly Gaia humanist school of thought to incorporate the aspect of creators or gods, or completely not even pay attention to that and just take care of our business. It wouldn't make a difference insofar as the development of a Gaia humanist philosophy of world administrative policy, of governments, and sociology ideologies would be new. We would be really thinking in terms of what is best for everybody's, as far as how the human body was designed. And and this is not falling into traditional conservatism either, because as soon as you do that, some people say, "Oh, you shall do," because we have taught ourselves to go binary or bipolar. If you're saying that, then you're sounding like you're from the left or from the right. No, we haven't developed this immense school of thought yet. It is humongous because it includes everything. It doesn't constrain itself to a narrow polar left or a narrow polar right. It explains why they both are going on repeating what they're saying, and joins them into a broad explanation of our existential condition. And therefore it would all be new. But I particularly like the fact that it also, what I explained before, highlights the fact that before we have used the character of authority or authoritarianism that we have embodied God with, to sort of borrow it, not just to explain that we don't understand this abstract reason why we keep failing or suffering or what have you against ourselves and against an unknown, but also we borrowed it to say, and therefore somehow some of us should have more authority over others, over the life of others. Some of us should have authority to rule over the lives of others. And therefore the hierarchy of subjugated and other, like a pyramid of more subjugated, less subjugated, and then the ones that are least subjugated on top, all also come from the explanations that something wanted this unexplained suffering to occur to us somehow, for whatever stories or reasoning we have inherited century after century, and just believing that this kind of loosely defines our predicament. When you own up to the question of our instability and our perpetual state of tendency towards disharmony with holding the truth also, because when you accept that we are perpetually in instability, it means that we also know what is true. It means, there is an unquestionable truth that we don't want to live only by that truth, because we would be simple tribes eating apples all day and, being happy with whatever we're able to make for ourselves that day, what have you. We couldn't be that. We wouldn't want that. And we would immediately start wanting to go further, because that other part of us will want to do something and will want to solve problems. Solve problems, yeah. It's not all. There is good and there is a good and a bad side to each one of these tangents, but I'm really getting in a pickle right now. But what I'm saying is that one of the good things about the realization of owning up to our existential condition predicament is knowing that there is an answer, as for a lot of things that whereas there would not be any longer a question that arise from an unexplained harm against each other. In other words, if we somehow get hurt by our own inventions, governments, ideologies, we would know that it's because we designed it that way. In fact, humankind designs everything. We have designed the whole world. We have designed everything, but we've never known how to own up to it as a single species, which is kind of saying the same thing, except that the explanation I gave before explains how we got started on the wrong foot, and therefore why it is indeed logically possible to think collectively. It doesn't mean that we have to order others what to do at all. And that kind of thinking comes from the part of the old thinking which says, something has the authority to have put us in this condition, in this perpetual suffering that we don't know why it keeps happening. When that is diffused and we realize we create our own predicament because of this instability, we also realize that the things that we design for a country, for an ideology, for a society, or what have you, do not have to separate people ever, because we're not separated by nature. Even people that are very different in skin color are really the same. We have been already made one, perhaps sometime that is not on the record in any way, maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago. Perhaps we were several species, a couple of variations, but we're no longer, and we haven't been for several hundred thousands of years. We are the single human being, no matter what our skin color. So when we start talking about each other, for example, in this subject, society, and we start talking about, for example, how to get rid of racism. Racism is also a word that we use to label a social situation, and now we use it to try to resolve a problem that we never had because we were always people to begin with, only all the same people. And instead, Gaia Humanism school thinking, way of looking at us, would start saying, it is natural perhaps to look for something when we're angry at somebody and we're upset and we don't accept their behavior anymore because they insulted, they offended us, or they did something that we didn't want, or whatever. We will look to devaluate them by something that will hurt his feelings, cut him down morally, hurt him, make him feel like he doesn't belong. And so we'll look for something physical. Well, maybe, the first thing we'll see, if he's really tall, it's like, we don't want people so tall around here. You're a nuisance. Or, and that's all skin color is a handle that we have used to express the other problems that have to do with how people treat each other in whatever given situation. And that is, that's just to give an example. So this is why I often write in Facebook, racism doesn't actually exist. We are going about it the wrong way. And by continuing to want to resolve it, by describing ways of addressing it and proposing civil formulas through which to behave in order for it not to happen, and describe all these things continuously using the words white and black, white and black, all we're doing is furthering this idea that those elements exist. And the next time, I'm upset at somebody, I just got to make sure that I don't use that word, that difference between us, to tell him that I'm mad. I have to tell him, something else. But I therefore have to bury what I have been told is an existing difference, though these existing differences have to be equal. So we totally complicate ourselves. Instead of teaching each other to be good people towards one another and to catch ourselves when we're being unfair and insensitive and hurtful by looking for a physical attribute to make the other person feel bad, like they don't belong to the rest, or they're not of my interest, or what have you, whatever makes me uncomfortable. And it's complicated because it also brings in ideas that we have about people, which are prejudices, preconceived notions, that come with attached labels. And then it's hard to re-explain our existence without using these formulas that we use to explain social conditions. And, so it is like we have to start from scratch and understand that we start from a single point and we're never separated. We are never separated. We don't need to ever be separated in any way. No human being has to be separated from another human being anywhere in the world. We may have a nationality, but that is still below the great unifier, which is being a human being. We may have a different skin tone, but that is always below the great unifier that we're all human beings. And when you talk about society, social issues, ideology, civil ideologies, what are you talking about? Human beings. So how can a discourse start on something that is below what the subject is talking about, which is human beings? We have convoluted, because we never owned up to our single predicament of instability, because of these two forces, these two manners, these expressions of intelligence. We have explained the world through a sort of a lofted, it's like we're limping, like we have always limped with our finger pointing at, I don't know who did this to me. It's that out there. It's that somehow there's something bad. It's God's will for us to be like challenged or punished or what have you. We come here, some say we come to the world to suffer. Others say we're God's creation. He's trying to help us overcome our sin, meaning some of us and all of us are destined to be born bad or something. We're never separated. We're never split. Even before birth, we come as one and we leave as one. And that one has a instability issue that is a gift. Okay, so basically, I hope this kind of explains what Gaia's humanism is. To the best of my abilities this evening. So long.